All right, so this week we're doing something a little bit different. You're going to start by listening to a presentation from some professionals that work with an organization called Precision Nutrition, and I'm certified through Precision. But I thought this was a really great presentation. It's a good way for us to segue into working with Chris next week. So in any case, they're giving a presentation on sleep and health, and then your article is on academic performance in undergraduate. So I'm also hopeful that this week feels one a little bit lighter maybe, but also that it really connects to your life, is what I'm hoping for. So the main idea here in this presentation is they're going to connect research, coaching, practice, and client context to improve sleep outcomes. And that should sound like evidence-based practice because those are the three pillars essentially of evidence-based practice. So one should really pay attention to how they use all three of those aspects to inform their decision making or how they would work with clients or how they're answering questions. So a couple of sort of specific questions to give you some focus for this presentation is think about what specific sleep behaviors and coaching strategies are being discussed. How do they balance the biological need and then client reality? I think that's a really tough one to do sometimes. Where do you then hear them using examples of like clinical experience? So where are they bringing in their work with clients versus just the research? They mentioned sleep debt and sleep procrastination, and I don't think they define them particularly well. So I'm hoping that you'll look them up, drop that in the perusal comment, right? Help your classmates out a little bit there. And then what do they say about those things? And then lastly, how do they address misinformation and fads? Because I think that the way they address it is I think they do a really good job of it, actually. And so I want you to pay particular attention to that. Um, okay, and then I'll put this at the end.
All right, there's our cue to go. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the another sleep stress and recovery webinar. I'm Dr. Krista Scott Dixon. Really stoked to be here with you today. Um, Forgive my my voice and occasional potentially coughing. I'm just getting over the obligatory start of fall virus that I'm sure a lot of you are enjoying that your kids have brought home from school or whatever. So if you see me coughing off camera, just talk amongst yourselves and we'll keep on trucking. But other than that, really happy to be here as one of the creators of the Sleep Stress and Recovery certification with PN. And with me here are a couple of other sleep stress and recovery rock stars in the field. I'll let them introduce themselves because I just want to make sure folks get to highlight their accomplishment. But these are two folks that were really quite integral to helping us create this amazing certification that covers all aspects of sleep stress and recovery. So Dr. Jennifer Martin, why don't I start with you? Can you just briefly introduce yourself, give us a little bit about your background and expertise, and yeah, kind of what you brought to this certification?
Yeah, thanks. I'm really excited to be here and very happy to see how many people want to learn more about this topic. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. I do a lot of research on ways to improve sleep in people who have sleep disorders and understand how sleeping better can help people feel and function better during the day. My day job is that I'm a professor of medicine at UCLA, and it was a lot of fun working with the PN team on developing the sleep stress and recovery certification.
Great, thank you. And Dr. Chris Winter, can you please introduce yourself and let us know what you do?
Of course, and welcome everyone. My name is Chris Winter. I'm a neurologist and sleep specialist based in Virginia and Florida. I'm largely clinical in nature, so I help adults and kids with sleep disorders. I work with several sports teams, including the Dodgers, who are now in the World Series. Unfortunately, Cleveland, who I also work with, lost to the Yankees. So their performance recovery, they need more of the precision nutrition seminar. Maybe if they listen to it one more time, they'll make the World Series next year. I've written two books about sleep. I do a podcast called Sleep Unplugged about sleep, and generally find the topic to be a lot of fun to talk about, and looking forward to sharing some things with you today.
Great, thank you. Well, as Dr. Jennifer and Dr. Chris implied in their comments, I mean, sleep stress and recovery is a topic that cover a wide range of areas. Obviously, athletes are one big part of it. We know that sleep is really integral to helping athletes recover. But I think that we've chosen for our focus today longevity and thinking about, how sleep can improve overall wellness with the idea of like, how can it help us maybe not live longer necessarily. Like, I'm not sure it's going to help us live to 120, but living better, having a better quality of life and kind of decreasing our risk of chronic diseases and so forth. So with that in mind, I just want to kind of get everyone on the same page because I think that this will probably inform our discussions that happen after it. But Dr. Chris, can you maybe start us off with helping us understand the basic architecture of sleep? Like, how does sleep happen? And how do these stages unfold, just so we all understand like what is actually happening when we lie down and shut our eyes?
Yeah, so sleep is a pretty dynamic process. It's always a little concerning when somebody says, I can't shut my mind off at night. Well, you don't really need to sleep. Your sleep, is happening with a very dynamic and busy brain during the night. Your brain really only shuts off when we die, so we don't want that to happen. So when we talk about sleep, we can look for certain signatures. So a lot of this is sort of constructed, meaning that somebody decided to tape some wires to somebody's brain during the night and kind of look and see what that looked like. And there are very distinctive patterns of electricity that happen when somebody sleeps. And people looked at that and saw sort of repetition in these patterns and characterized them as being light sleep, deep sleep, and dream sleep. And you can be even more academic than that if you want to. But in general, brains typically follow a sort of predictable pattern throughout the night where, for instance, you see somebody dreaming about every 45 minutes to hour throughout the night with the dreams getting a little bit bigger. We tend to have most of our deep sleep during the first half of the night and less during the second. And I think it's important to understand these things because if individuals are going to wear devices or track their sleep, it's probably a good idea to have at least a basic understanding of what that looks like, because I have patients who come in upset that they're waking up during the night. It's very normal to wake up during the night. In fact, it's normal to wake up a lot during the night. It's very normal to only have an hour or two of deep sleep in the first half of the night and very little, if any, during the second half of the night. So I think it's important to kind of understand these things because if you're somebody who's paying attention to them, knowing what's normal and what's abnormal is sort of the first place to start when it comes to understanding your sleep as a means to potentially improving it to some degree.
Well, I felt some relief when you said it's normal to ... It's normal to have this. It's normal to have that, because I think that, like sleep has really been in the health optimization scene recently. And I think of, was it Brian Johnson, the guy who claims that he's had like 100% sleep efficiency for the last several months. And, part of me thinks like this is the life of a person with without kids and other responsibilities in life. I think that most of us have lives that are a little bit messier and more chaotic and less perfect, so to speak. And I think a lot of us worry about like, is my sleep good? Am I doing it right? So I personally felt some relief when you said like it's normal to have this, this, and this. And this brings me to the topic of wearables. So I've got my Garmin watch on that tracks my sleep. And I have to confess, like when I had this virus recently, I was coughing at night, I actually took my watch off because, again, like as one of the writers of the certification, I know it's not judging me, right? And I know that my job is to not to make it happy. But I felt this weird sense of like, oh, but I don't want to like wreck my sleep numbers. So, Dr. Chris, can you keep telling us a little bit more about like, first of all, how accurate are these kinds of sleep tracking devices like smartwatches, like rings and so forth? Like, are they really, that precise to the point where we should be treating what they say as like scientific gospel about our sleep?
It's funny. I always tell people that I think sleep trackers, to some degree, do provide beneficial information. It's like you're in a math class and your teacher has a pop quiz of 5 questions to see if you did the reading assignment, and how indicative is that 5-question quiz to your knowledge of math or that subject? It's got some value, but it's not you're like, well, I didn't study that one night, but every other night I studied, or this is one concept I struggle with. So I think there's value there. The real value with a wearable is that it's longitudinal, meaning that you're getting some data of some degree of quality every night over 30 days. So if a patient comes to me and says, I get terrible sleep scores every night for the past 6 months, I gave my partner my device and she started wearing it and she's getting great results, there's probably some value there. I think where we get into trouble with these things, we tend to overemphasize. And don't get me started about Brian Johnson. I was just talking about him on my podcast because somebody said, I think this guy's going to live to be 200. I'm like, there is no, talk to Dr. Martin, there's no data out there that is indicating that humans are going to be 200 anytime soon if it ever happens, especially if we're talking about one individual guy that thinks he's eating mushrooms and wearing sleep wearables is going to somehow unlock a secret to allow him to sleep twice as long, more than twice as long as the average individual. So he illustrates to me the problem with this kind of technology. It almost becomes like cultish in a weird way. Like, we're really into hacking our sleep and hacking our brains and living to be 300. I mean, I guess there are worse pursuits in your life, but I think that ultimately your pursuit of that goal is not changing the fact that city buses take people out all the time. They don't care about your wearable. And so I think I always think of things as a spectrum. That guy is like in the purple area of the spectrum. He's caring too much about sleep versus the red area of the spectrum. You don't care at all about sleep and think that if you get 2 or 3 hours of sleep a night, you're doing fine. I want everybody in that green area, care about it, but care about it to a point where you can still interact with your family without driving them crazy about sleep talk and obsessive and kind of like what you were saying. I don't want to mess up my perfect 96%. Like, I'm upset about my 4.96 Uber rating. Like, I'm a nice person. I always tip. What happened to my 5-star rating? So you might say, Chris, you're over analyzing the Uber rating a little bit. Don't do that with your sleep.
I love it. We actually had someone that worked with us at PN whose goal in life was to optimize his Uber rating, and he had a whole algorithm of how to do that. So clearly, there's more than one of you out there, and I salute your efforts, as do all the Uber drivers of the world. But I think that you bring up something really important, which is the feelings around this that it can bring up, right? Dr. Jennifer, we know there's this thing called orthosomnia, which is this kind of like excessive focus on getting perfect sleep and then worrying about like what's going to happen, because we do have all this really wonderful clear data about the links between sleep and health, right? We do know that poor sleep done consistently is quite strongly correlated with a bunch of health risks. But what do you see in your practice in terms of people worried about their sleep, and how do you talk to people about kind of how to deal with that in a productive and positive way?
Well, first I'm like trying to figure out, I've never even looked at my Uber rating, but now I'm going to see how that works.
Not.
Suggestibility.
It's fine. I'm sure it's fine.
Right. So I think though that I'm so happy that we're talking about this, because I think, Chris and I probably both see people who come to us and say, I need your help, doc, because I only have 3% REM. And my next question is always, well, how do you feel during the day? I like to use height as a metaphor. Not everyone is 5'9", and not everyone needs 7.7 hours of sleep every night. Not everyone wakes up 3 or fewer times to feel great. And so I think we have to honor and respect that there are individual differences in sleep that are completely normal. The other issue that comes up is sleep is the thing that you do when you stop trying. And for this, this concept of orthosomnia, really it's putting tons of effort into something that only happens when you're not putting effort into it. So, I have a patient I'm working with right now, and one of the very first things that we did in working on his insomnia was get rid of the wearable. Because he would wake up in the morning, look at his sleep score, and then decide how he was going to feel during the day. And, Chris, you mentioned that these these devices, and I've got one on too, which I often don't wear at night. But they use movement and sometimes heart rate as a proxy for measuring sleep. They don't actually measure sleep. And one of the things that I've noticed is we started talking about how much activity is going on during sleep in our brain and body. It's not very good, for example, at knowing whether you're in REM sleep or you're awake, probably because your heart rate is really variable in both of those states. So as a scientist, I'm always questioning, like, show me how you came up with your algorithm, which companies don't do. They don't show you because it's all proprietary. And so we have to accept that there's like a plus or minus to the data that the wearables are giving us, and not get too obsessed with the 4.897 star rating. What we need to know is everyone with a star rating of 4 and above is a good Uber rider, right? That's about it.
It's not helping. Hey, I don't want to jump in and be the host, but I want Jennifer to talk a little bit more about, because you mentioned how we feel about our sleep.
Yeah,
And
right.
I think that could be really helpful to listeners in terms of, I kind of divide people into actually good sleepers and not good sleepers. And then this way, people who feel good about their sleep and don't feel good about their sleep. And I just wanted you to touch upon the power of how we feel. Like when we wake up and see that score, that frowny face, just how powerfully that can influence the way we feel about our sleep, and then how that feeds backwards.
Yeah, that's such a great. So we as humans are very responsive to, and this is not just true for sleep, but other things as well. That if we anticipate that something is not going to go well, it won't. I've done research on this area too about like different expectations about sleep across age groups. And one of the things that we're finding is that in some age groups, people have very low expectations for their sleep. So older people might say, well, of course I wake up all the time. I have terrible sleep. I'm just old. But that's really not true. And a lot of times when, a 75 or 80-year-old tells me like, well, what do you expect? I'm 80 years old. It turns out they have an underlying sleep disorder. On the flip side, I think that there are a lot of young people who just expect they're going to be tired all the time. And when we dive a little deeper, we find out, well, actually, you're tired all the time because you're only getting like 5 hours of sleep. And this is not a normal way of being. And if you slept more, you would feel less tired. So the expectation piece is really important. And again, it's like the wearable friend or foe. Wearables can be really useful when we're trying to change our own behavior. Tracking what we do as a way to motivate ourselves to change in positive ways is great. So when I'm trying to get someone to sleep more, I love wearables because it holds them accountable. And if we say like bedtime is 10:30, well, within reason, the wearable can provide us with information about how many nights in a week they're actually hitting that target. Whereas if somebody is struggling to kind of let go and fall asleep, that information that is taking them an average of 40 minutes every night is not going to help them by being more precise about it.
I love that. And
Outstanding.
as you were talking, it really reminded me of how people sometimes will treat the bathroom scale or the tape measure or some kind of body fat analyzer. It's like, am I going to have a good day or a bad day, depending on what this device tells me? And they can be handy sometimes for tracking longitudinal change, as you say. But I think the question for all of our listeners, and if you are working with clients, this is a great question to ask. Does this motivate me in a positive way?
Correct.
So you'll get people who love their devices. They do great with devices. It really fires them up and inspires them, and they feel good about it. Other people, it's just a downward spiral. So does this motivate me in positive ways? All of you coaches out there, that's a great coaching question.
And Krista, I love using devices to test out always or never statements about sleep. So when someone says, I always get up at 6, let's measure that. Let's track it for a while. Oh, I never stay up past 11. Okay. Well, let's get some objective, estimates of that, and then we'll see what never and always really mean.
Oh, it's a scary question for the client from the coach because, that's when the client's like, I always eat healthy. And the coach just says,
I
great, let's
never
see
eat
your
junk
food
food.
journal.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was on a radio show in London, and this guy was telling everybody he was very popular, and he had this big radio audience. He's like, I never sleep more than 2 hours a night. I'm like, that's not possible. That's not happening. And he said, well, it is. I said, well, why don't you get a camera and live stream yourself 24 hours a day for your listeners and prove it? Because if it's true, I need to see it, because that's never really been reported that somebody is as functional as you are, only sleeping 2 hours a night, but he would never do it. But that's really funny. He said, prove it. I love it. Prove it. Let's do it.
Yeah, you're like, you're a medical miracle. I mean, we could maybe get NASA or something involved here.
There's a
Like, we need
Nobel
to
Prize
study
out
you.
there somewhere, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. Totally. I mean, this now kind of leads into this question of sleep debt, right? Like, we talk about sleep debt in the certification. Like, what is sleep debt, and really, like, how bad is it? Dr. Chris, let me throw that one to you.
Yeah, I mean, sleep debt to me is it's a real thing. I mean, it's sort of whatever your optimal amount of sleep is, you're not getting it for a period of time. And we all have it. So I mean, to lead a life, I mean, this crazy millionaire is trying to hack his own brain and get 100% efficiency. That's great, but my guess is he's missing out on a lot of great Super Bowl parties and wedding receptions and things like that. I've got to leave the wedding because if I don't leave now, I won't get 100% sleep efficiency. So I mean, I think sleep debt is part of our life. It depends on a lot of things. Number one, it depends on knowing how much sleep you need. And that's where it can start to become a problem. If you've decided you need 10 hours of sleep to be your best, but you're really only genetically capable of sleeping 7.5 hours, you're not accruing a sleep debt, even though you think you are. You're just not, your expectation of your sleep's high. So outside of that, if you're talking to a trauma surgeon and she says, look, I'm generally averaging about 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep a night, but I'm good with that. You're probably not. It's like what Jennifer said, that her belief that she's good is powerful. And yeah, I mean, her surgeries are all successful. She's never hurt anybody. But I think that over time, she is moving towards negative health outcomes, maybe negative surgical outcomes, mood problems, early deaths of all different causes. So, sleep debt is real. I think that the real question really becomes, and I love talking to sleep doctors about this because they all have different opinions about it. How important is it? Can you overcome a sleep debt? The thing that I always tell people, based upon my understanding and reading of research, is that a short-term sleep debt's probably not a big deal. I always tell people, maybe think less about 7 hours a night and think more about 49 hours a week. That if you're ending the week hitting your target, you're probably going to be fine. You're probably going to live just as long as the crazy guy who's trying to sleep perfectly every night. Because something's going to happen. Your flight's going to be delayed. A friend needs your help, and you have to console them on the phone until 3 o'clock in the morning because their marriage is falling apart. I mean, shit happens. I mean, so I think the idea that we're not going to accrue sleep debt is like not accruing food debt. You'll skip meals. You'll be driving and not find any restaurant to get to. Like, we're built to have some fluctuation there. I think the real key is just having a plan for it and not making the sleep debt plan A. It's, I'm going to try to get my sleep, but when something happens, I will prioritize over the next 7 days trying to make up for this. This happened to me. I've moved my son from Annapolis to Pensacola, got him down there, situated in his new place, and then I was going to fly back, and the flight was delayed. And I didn't want his clinic, so I just rented a car and drove 7.5 hours. So I voluntarily accrued a sleep debt that night. But over the next 3 nights, I went to bed early, made sure I didn't get up early, and tried to make up for that sleep that was lost. Like, I wasn't scared of the debt, but it's like credit card debt. I've got all kinds of credit card debt, but I pay my credit card at the end of the month. So think of it as like a little sleep credit card. You got 7 days, no interest, no finance charges, as long as you pay it off that way. So that's my opinion. I think that a lot of sleep doctors have varying opinions, so take mine with a grain of salt.
Well, I mean, I really appreciate, I think both of you have a lovely approach in this respect, which is a very like reality-based approach. Like you said, shit happens. Like we all live lives of randomness. I had someone's car alarm go off, like in the middle of the night last night for me. Like there's just things that happen and that are uncontrollable and that we all need to kind of situate our expectations in reality. And speaking of that, I know that sleep procrastination is a very big reality-based topic, and in my case, it involves actual reality because one of the things my partner and I do is stay up late watching reality TV some nights because, after he comes home, we have like an hour together, right? So it's like, what can we do to just like relax, chill out, sit on the couch, eat dinner, and watch some garbage TV to just like connect and have some laughs. But then that means I'm going to bed too late, right? So, I mean, people procrastinate on their sleep for all kinds of reasons. Sometimes it's lack of planning. Sometimes it's like, okay, the kids are finally in bed, and this is the last like half hour I have before I just pass out like to myself. Um, Maybe this is when I get other things done. Maybe I'm a student, like whatever. Dr. Jennifer, can you talk a little bit about sleep procrastination, some of the different motivations for it, and maybe how you deal with it in some of your clients?
Yeah, and I'm going to kind of build on where Chris started this because we have some flexibility. We don't have to be so rigid every day. We don't eat exactly the same number of calories every day and maintain our weight, right? It's kind of the average. The catch is the bigger the sleep debt, the fewer days you can put in order. So if you stay up a half hour later than normal for a few nights, there's really no impairment. But if you stay up all night, your performance is impaired the next day. The other trick about this is that the more sleep deprived you are, the worse you are at making good choices. So I think one of the challenges with sleep procrastination that comes up is that people are so tired that they don't make a good decision about when to go to bed the next day. And they think, I deserve to have some me time. I can't tell you how many times I hear that. This is the only time that I have to myself is after the kids go to bed and, my husband is upstairs watching TV and finally I can sit and do what I want to do. The way that I work with people around that is if let's say that you identify, I need a couple of hours every week that's just me time. Does it really have to be after 11 p.m.? What if it was just 1 hour in the evening and then another hour you had someone else watch your kids on Saturday and you went out for a walk and you got your me time in a way that's way more productive and not such a contributor to this sleep debt? But I think that this idea that we sort of deserve this time, our biology doesn't care. So it's probably not worth the trade-off in terms of wanting to fulfill this need for, time with your partner or time to yourself and give up sleep instead of giving up something else. The time that you spend sitting next to your partner on the couch, exhausted, watching reality TV probably isn't as good for your relationship as getting a decent night of sleep and getting up and taking your dog for a walk in the morning. Just again.
Didn't come on here to be personally attacked, but there it is. But this actually brings up a good question that I just saw pop up in the chat. What about people who, for them, it's like early in the morning is the only time I have for exercise, let's say, or, like, what do we do with people who are sacrificing sleep on the other end, in a sense, to do things like exercise? And feel free for both of you to weigh in on this one.
Same answer, really.
I'll just say, I'm just building on what Jennifer said. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
what Jennifer said was important is that sacrificing your sleep for social time, exercise. Listen, I think we all deserve a little downtime. I really do. But the problem becomes if you're sacrificing your sleep to exercise, I can almost guarantee you that the rest of your day is going to be much more inefficient. So the thing that actually took you 4 hours to get done and a lot of coffee, maybe could take you 3 hours to get done had you gotten some sleep. So I think that, it's okay to exercise. It's okay to do these things. But if you're constantly creating the decision matrix that it's coming out of sleep and not something else, I think you ultimately suffer for it. And Jennifer said it earlier, but you don't know you are. You know, hey, Chris, what's it like being tall? It's not that big of a deal. Well, easy for you to say because you're short. You don't know, you have no basis for making that decision. Maybe if we made you tall magically, you would change your mind about that. Like, wow, love it. People respect me more. I can reach the spices. This is great. Like, I had no idea. And that's where, I think it's always fun, like with your clients, do a week challenge. Spend 7 hours in bed, not sleeping, just challenge them to allot a certain time for sleep and rest. And at the end of the week, what'd you think? I mean, a lot of people are like, my God, that was so much better. I feel so much better, right? Because you felt so bad for so long, you have no idea. So this idea of getting up early to get your exercise in, to what end? Health? Performance? No, that's not how that works. You've cut yourself off at the knees by doing that. So it's better to sleep in and exercise more infrequently, I think. You got to get your sleep.
I mean, those are the data, right? That if you, especially for people who are trying to lose weight, if you aren't getting enough sleep, adding exercise won't help you lose weight. Only getting more sleep will help you lose weight. I mean, because your body interprets sleep deprivation as like scarcity, right? Like there must not be enough food, or there's a threat, or there's something I got to hold on to all this extra for the future. That's kind of how we're made. So, I think that when I've worked with folks who do personal training or client coaching in the fitness space, this is a big issue because a lot of times people want to come in and they want to see their trainer before they go to work. And I always think like the conversation should start with, great, do you have enough time to go to bed earlier in the evening? Because if not, the 4 a.m. workout session is not the solution. I think as somebody who loves exercising in the morning, there were years when I had teenage kids who don't go to bed early and want help with their homework or a trip to Staples at 9 p.m. to buy a poster board. And it was very difficult for me. And I had to kind of change my routine because I couldn't keep getting up early in the morning because I couldn't get to bed early enough because of my family responsibilities. And I think that being realistic about that, or another alternative is, not insisting on a 2-hour workout in the morning, but maybe just getting 30 minutes in and doing something again later in the day to try to make sure that you're getting a decent night of sleep. Actually, earlier this week, Allison Brager, who does research on sleep and performance in the military, came to UCLA and gave a talk and was talking about risk of injury, which is another issue for athletes in particular, but for everyone, that when you're sleep deprived, you're actually more likely to get injured when you're exercising. And on the flip side, afterward, you recover more slowly if you don't get enough sleep after an injury. So those are all things to keep in mind, and trying to find that balance between your physical fitness and getting enough sleep.
I think these are all really essential points. And also, as someone who coaches, especially a lot of personal trainers, the personal trainers are sleep deprived too, because they also have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever it is to run your 6 a.m. boot camp or whatever it is. So collectively, there's like a whole group of people who are in a gym right now early in the morning, exhausted and sleep deprived. And Dr. Jennifer, you mentioned the data, and I mean, and me time as well. And I'm going to kind of hurt people's feelings here a little bit with what the data is coming out and saying about alcohol. Unfortunately, we're beginning, for those of us who love a good cocktail, we're beginning to discover that really the data are suggesting that, first of all, no amount of alcohol is really particularly safe. No alcohol is health promoting, because we used to think like, oh, a glass of red wine is, good for my heart. And the data are now saying, actually, no, that's not actually true. Alcohol is a potent neurotoxin, unfortunately. But of course, we all live in the real world, again, like a good cocktail or glass of wine. So, I mean, what should people know about the effect of alcohol on sleep? And I'm also thinking especially of, women in that kind of midlife age group who may be more sensitive to the effects of alcohol thanks to perimenopause and menopause. Maybe Dr. Jennifer, I'll start with you and then throw it to Dr. Chris. Like, what should we be thinking about with the effects of alcohol?
Yeah, so I during COVID, the amount of alcohol that people consume went up really dramatically, and so did complaints about sleep. And I saw some really interesting data on search terms that people were, what were people Googling or using search engines to find during COVID, and how to fall asleep was one of them. Alcohol is very tricky because it's initially relaxing and sedating, but as alcohol is metabolized, it's very disruptive to sleep. So some people drink alcohol to relax in the evening, and then at bedtime, that's when that peak sleep disruption kind of kicks in. Other people drink late in the evening to try to help themselves fall asleep, and then they have trouble sleeping in the middle of the night. How much you drink matters. So drinking a lot disrupts your sleep more than drinking a little. And, Chris mentioned this, but I love experiments. So very recently I worked with someone who was having a hard time waking up a lot in the middle of the night. And every day he'd come up from work and have about 3 or 4 beers. And I said, well, I wonder if just for 1 week you didn't drink in the evenings. And his sleep was so much better. And he was surprised because this had been his routine for years and years. Not even talking about the non-sleep health issues with drinking that much. But, in the end, what he decided is that a few days a week, he was still going to, sit outside and have a couple beers with his wife in the evening, and just know that there was a cost to that. His sleep wasn't going to be perfect. But that, the nightly heavy drinking really wasn't serving him well, and it was preventing him from sleeping as well as he might like to. So I think that it's kind of tricky because people are often very reluctant to change their behaviors around alcohol. And this like kind of experiment, like, well, let's test, because people say, oh, it doesn't affect, I fall right asleep, it's not a big deal. The mid-sleep awakenings are the part that I think a lot of people miss because it's hours later and they don't kind of recognize the connection. I did this experiment myself a few years back where I gave up all caffeine and alcohol for a couple of weeks. And the caffeine didn't really affect my sleep. I drink it early in the day, but I definitely slept better with no alcohol. And it made me very mindful of that, like having a cocktail in the evening without really thinking about it. It helped me to reconceptualize that there actually is a cost to that beyond, I think the known health risks, that there's a direct relationship to how well I was sleeping at night.
You want to add to that, Dr. Chris?
Yeah, not much. I mean, I think 2 things. Number one, Precision Nutrition did something like that a while back where they were challenging people, hey, 2 weeks, no alcohol, 2 weeks alcohol, or 2 weeks, 65-degree temperature in your bedroom, 2 weeks hotter. And I participated in the alcohol study because I don't drink that much anymore. And so I thought it was interesting. And so like for 2 weeks had no alcohol. And then for 2 weeks had 2 beers. And I found some Dragon Fire milk stout, the worst beer I could find. And it was truly awful. Hey, my sleep was terrible. And then what would happen was I'd be sitting there brushing my teeth and my wife would be like, did you have your beers tonight? I'm like, oh God, I forgot my beers. And so I like in my pajamas, like right before bed, like shotgunning these 2 beers at, 11 o'clock at night, which was a fun way to go to bed. But, I think that a lot of this comes around because if you look at 100 magazine articles or media outlets sort of things about sleep, it's all about falling asleep faster and not waking up at night. That's the only thing we pay any attention to. Here's some simple tips and tricks for falling asleep faster. So the metric, if you ask people, are you a good sleeper or a bad sleeper, 90% of the time is how fast you fall asleep. I'm a terrible sleeper because it takes me an hour to fall asleep. My husband over here, he's asleep before his head hits the pillow. He's a great sleeper. No, he's probably got more of a problem than you do in a weird way. So when we have this constant dialogue of falling asleep fast is what you want, that's the ticket to health and beauty and success, we kind of value sedation. And so now we've got this weird kind of problem of sedation being the key to good sleep, not good sleep being the key to good sleep. And so it's funny, every time I give a lecture about sleep, I always talk about alcohol. And there's always at least one person at the end of the lecture who says these exact words. Great lecture. I hear what you're saying about alcohol, but for me, a couple beers just really, right. So again, no, you're saying a couple beers knocks you out faster. That's not really what we want when it comes to sleep. And Jennifer already said it, sleep's a passive thing. It's not something we have to work to make happen. It's going to happen. It's impossible not to sleep. So this idea of alcohol somehow, I've stopped trying to influence adult behaviors many years ago. All I say to people is, look, drink if you want to drink. You're a big boy, you're a big girl, go for it. Just don't associate the alcohol with something positive related to your sleep or your health. So when I drink, I know this is not great, but it's my son's graduation or my whatever thing. And I'm going to make an exception knowing that my night might not be great. I might be increasing my risk of cancer by 0.0003%. But at this point right now, I feel it's worth it to have this mixed drink. So anyway, I think that as long as people understand that this is not positive, but you decide, it's like her client, he's like, I'm going to have a beer every now and then, but you're right, it is affecting my sleep. So more often than not, I'm not going to do that. That's a huge victory. That's amazing. So I'll take that any day of the week.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that's coming out of what both of you are saying, something that we talk about a lot in a lot of the PN certifications for teaching coaching is priorities, right? Like having a grown-up conversation with grown-ups about what are your priorities? What are you willing to trade off? What do you want? We have this exercise called want, willing, and won't, which is like, what do you want? What are you willing to do for it? And what will you not do for it? What won't you do for it? And this can be a really great conversation to get people thinking about what they're trading off and do those trade-offs intentionally rather than just randomly or automatically. Okay, so now I'm seeing lots and lots of questions coming in, and I want to make sure that we get to some of them. So I apologize if we don't get to your question, but I'll do my best to run through some of them. One of the ones that pops out right away, which is a question we get every single time, and as a 51-year-old woman, this is near and dear to my heart, but can you talk a little bit about perimenopause and the menopause transition and sleep? Whoever wants to take this question.
Yeah, so actually, I've been studying sleep disorders in women for the past, I guess, about 15 years now. And one of the things that is happening, I think, in women in this, age group is biology is changing, right? So hormone levels change. That can disrupt sleep. Hot flashes at night can be very disruptive to sleep. And one of the approaches that we take is like, be prepared. So if you are having hot flashes at night, as opposed to waking up, and we talked about kind of your mindset and thinking, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening again. This is terrible. I'm never going to get through that. What if you just had like a thermos of ice water and a new set of pajamas right there, and you didn't even turn on the lights, and you just changed and drank some cold water and went back to sleep? So we work a lot on hot flash coping. The other thing that changes a lot, though, is that rates of sleep apnea, which we haven't talked about too much, and I don't know if Chris wants to say more, but that increases dramatically in women from before to after menopause. So in men, the age increase is a little bit linear, but in women, there's a big change there. So we tend to be more suspicious of sleep apnea in postmenopausal women. The other thing is that now women in their 50s tend to also have, like, for example, teenagers and aging parents. So there are a lot of social demands on that age group that I think contribute to stress that women take to bed with them. Not to say that men don't experience those same stressors, but I think layered on top of symptoms related to menopause, it can cause some pretty significant sleep disturbance.
You want to add to that, Dr. Chris?
Yeah, as appealing as it would be to mansplain menopause to somebody who studies it, that was an amazing answer. I think that it's multifaceted, it's real, and it is a mistake that I made when my editor of my first book said, you got to cut your book down, take some stuff out. I took out menopause and regret it to this day. So, but Jennifer did a great job with that. Yeah, there's a lot going on with that, and it's real. It's not made up. I would say this. I think that, I'm 51 too. And if your doctor kind of looks like me, we grew up and came through the medical machinery at a time when hormone replacement therapy was unfairly demonized. Um, and there's some great articles about it. There's a wonderful podcast on the New York Times about it. Like, I think it was called Menopause is Having Its Moment. I think that I'm not saying that hormone replacement is for everyone, but just be careful if you're dealing with a provider who says, oh, we can't do that because it increases your risk of cancer and stroke. Sure, but it's way, way, way more nuanced than that. And it deserves a bit more of an even, more balanced communication. And if you're not having that with the doctor that looks like me, find a doctor that's more willing to understand hormone replacement in its entirety.
I love that. Thank you for that vote, which is, I believe, the consensus position of the North American Menopause Society. So this is all very in line with accepted best practices. And
Yeah,
I
this
just know
isn't fringe, exactly.
yeah, no, this is not crazy side quest bad stuff. And just as a real quick side quest, I saw a question pop in about sleeping alone or with a partner. And I think a lot of couples have been coming out a little bit more publicly to say we've actually been sleeping separately, and not because of any marital conflict, but because we just get better sleep that way. And it's certainly something that's true with me and my partner. We often will separate into our own little sleep nooks for various reasons, whether that's shift work, whether that's someone's restless or different schedules or whatever. And it's actually, in my experience, a great solution. And we know, I think, from data that women tend to sleep worse with a partner. Men tend to sleep either neutrally or better. I'm not sure if you've seen that in your clients as well, but I'd be curious, just as a one-off, what do we know about sleeping with partners? Obviously, male, female, kids, adults, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of different, sleeping with a dog, sleeping with your cat, like, what do we know about co-sleeping in terms of the quality of sleep that you would get?
So, I mean, I think that there's like a perfect sleep environment where like nothing ever bothers you or disturbs you or touches you. And for some couples, that's just not worth the trade-off of not sleeping together. Our colleague Wendy Troxel wrote a great book called Sharing the Covers, which is about sleeping as a couple and some of the pros and cons of sleeping together and not sleeping together and how couples navigate conversations around that, which I absolutely love. I think that, we often forget that sleep is actually, it's social, isn't it? Like it's something very few people do alone. The one area where I get the most pushback, I have to tell you, Krista, is not people sleeping with or without their partner. It's sleeping with or without their dog. And it's ridiculous because, I mean, however, dogs don't sleep like humans. And there are studies that show that people who sleep with a dog on their bed have more disrupted sleep than having the dog near the bed in the same room. So, I think that there are a lot of things in our environment that disturb our sleep. For people who like sleeping with their partner, it's probably worth the trade-off. The big problem that I think I see a lot is when the partner has a sleep disorder like sleep apnea and they snore, and that can be extremely disruptive to a bed partner's sleep. And it can be difficult to motivate a partner to get a disorder treated that they are not motivated to get treated. And in those instances, sometimes the best solution is sleeping separately. I think it's also there's an element of privilege in this. It assumes that you have a second great space to sleep. And in some family circumstances, that's not realistic. So I think that's another challenge as we think about economic disparities. Some families don't have the luxury of saying, well, you disrupt my sleep, so I'm going to go sleep somewhere else.
Right. We don't have the spare reclining room in our
Exactly.
Victorian mansion.
The extra guest room out by the garden, right?
Exactly. Dr. Chris, we've had questions coming in about sleep supplements. It's a topic that I know that you've spoken about a lot, something we cover in the certification a bit. Like, people often ask, what should I be taking? Is there something that's evidence-based? Like, can you just comment briefly on some sleep supplements that you'd either recommend or at least kind of say have some evidence to support them, and what doesn't have evidence to support it?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with supplements is it's usually framed in the question, which ones work? Work is a troublesome word in sleep. It's kind of like, yeah, the analogy I always give with supplements, you're an elite track athlete. You're what's her Sydney McLaughlin, you're that hurdler that just crushes everyone. Like, she might go to her coaches and say, I'm thinking about trying a different kind of cleat because I'm trying to get a little bit more grip on my start, or a bit more secure when I get ready to go over a hurdle. And she makes that switch. And sure enough, she's taking off 0.2, 0.3 seconds on her time consistently. So did the change in her cleats work? Yes, it did make her, statistically a slightly faster runner. That's different than her having some sort of injury, or a person who's never run the hurdles before saying, which cleat should I use to have elite running? Oh, no, 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 no. There is no cleat that's going to make you an elite runner. You've never stepped foot on a track before. So you investing in these cleats is absurd until we get certain things organized. And I think that that's really where we have to come to with the supplements. I'm a pretty good sleeper. I've noticed in my sleep tracking, my scores are in the upper 80s, low 90s. I feel pretty good during the day. Anything that I could use potentially to bump that up, maybe? Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, magnesium can be helpful. I mean, I think if you're a shift worker or travel, melatonin could be something you look at. I mean, just more balanced diet and making sure you're getting all of your B vitamins. I mean, all those things are great. The problem is most people are coming to these supplements with sort of disastrous sleep. It takes me 4 hours to fall asleep. I'm a disaster during the day. Which magnesium should I use? This is not think of the term supplement. It's not solution, it's supplement. You're going to take something and supplement it a little bit. So to me, the way we approach supplements is really everything about what are we looking for? A couple percentage points here and there, or you've got such profound issues with your sleep that you need to start from the beginning and relearn some things about your sleep, like in the class that you developed, and understand the fundamentals of sleep, what it means to have sleep. What is insomnia? What is it really? What is your attitude about sleep? What is your consistency? Oh yeah, prove it. Here, let's do some diaries and some try. Like, that's what needs to happen. So the short answer is there's no quick fix.
I want to add
coming
one
at it
thing.
with, I need a quick fix, what supplement, it's not going to help.
Every time I say that, people always say, but when I take this, it works. And remember the comment I made earlier about sleep is the thing that happens when you stop trying. I think for a lot of people, taking a supplement that they believe will help allows them to stop trying. And that works for a while, but it's actually a placebo effect. I had a patient years ago who said, if you could just switch my sleeping pill with a Tic Tac, but not tell me, it would work. And I think that that's the perceived benefit that people get from supplements a lot of times is a placebo effect. The harm is the money that you spend on something that doesn't actually work for treating a sleep disorder. And so I see a lot of people who finally come in to see a psychologist, which is the last thing that people do, not the first thing. And they've spent thousands of dollars on everything they can possibly think of before reaching out for professional help. So I think I really appreciate your comment. And again, I think the perception that a lot of clients will have that the coaches are working with is that, oh no, it helped for a while, so I started taking more. But it helped for a while specifically because you believed it was going to work and therefore you stopped putting effort into sleep.
And think of how psychologically damning that is, that you tried it, it kind of worked, then it stopped working. Right. Then I tried that other pill and it worked, and then it stopped working. So now in your mind, my sleep is so bad that all the pills, all the things that are out there to help people sleep, even things Lindsey Vonn believes in. I mean, this helped Lindsey Vonn win gold medals, I think, right? I think that's what the commercial says. And even the Lindsey Vonn pill doesn't work for me. That is a very dark place to be in. Like, you feel like medically you are so bad that you're beyond treatment, when in fact you were going in the wrong direction from the beginning. That you're if you had just seen the psychologist to begin with and not the last resort. Because that's the other problem with the internet. Oh, there's always going to be 30% of people that bizarre thing improved your golf swing and made you sleep better, and organized your spices in a way that they're really convenient in your kitchen now because of this person influencer. Like, it just seems like there's so many positive things out there. It's kind of hard to separate what's real and what's not.
Well, on that note, I saw a couple questions pop into the Q&A. Mouth tape. How do we feel about mouth tape? Quick response on mouth tape.
Show me the data. I mean, I don't see a lot of data out there, and there's I know that there's a lot of buzz around this, and I have safety concerns. Like, it's not just that we don't have evidence to show that it's helpful for the vast majority of people, but I don't know if there could be potential harms, especially for people who might have other unrecognized sleep disorders. So Chris, unless you know something I don't, there really aren't data out there to show. I mean, there's anecdotal evidence, but again, I mean, when you do something like that and you think it's going to help you, it probably does. But I'm very skeptical and reluctant to recommend or endorse mouth taping.
Yeah, I mean, I try to play devil's advocate with most everything in my life. I mean, my guess, there is no data, so that's the end of the conversation. I would bet that, sort of similar to a chin strap that some people will use, that by taping your mouth and stabilizing your jaw a little bit, the most subtle of snoring and sleep apnea might be helped. But again, there's no data to support that. And the concern it was a good one, is the mouth taping delaying figuring out what the real problem really is. And any doctor who deals with sleep would not be terribly comfortable sealing this part of your body off at night, in terms of emesis, if you had to vomit. It's just kind of a scary thing. So I always tell people, I think about mouth taping for sleep like I think about butt taping for irritable bowel. I'll leave it at that. I'll mute myself now.
That was amazing. Limogist from Dr. Chris. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time. And I mean, gosh, there's just so many questions coming into the Q&A. We've gotten to like 1% of them, right? And these are the kinds of questions that do get answered in the sleep stress and recovery certification. And so I just want to remind people, like, if these questions are burning in your mind, definitely get on the pre-sale list for the launch of the next round, which is coming up November the 12th. Let me close it up, because I think that a lot of coaches are on this call and thinking about specific client scenarios, like, I have a client that's struggling with this and with that, or how do I convince, like, my client to do such and such. And of course, as coaches, we don't really convince, but we do have techniques to nudge them in the right direction. So as the final question, I'd really love to know from both of you, maybe Dr. Jennifer, I'll start with you. What would be like your top 1 or 2 tips to give to coaches who are trying to help clients? Like, where should someone start? Is there a high percentage coaching approach that you like? I mean, what's 1 or 2 tips that you would give to coaches who want to help their clients improve their sleep?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just keep it simple. Like, ask some open-ended questions about sleep. I mean, just starting the conversation, I think, is super important. And then in terms of what to focus on, I mean, focus on routines, having similar structure on, across the days of the week, across weeks of the year. That's kind of where the most benefit is achieved. But if you're not asking your clients about sleep, start asking how they sleep, if they have any issues or concerns or questions. I think that's probably step one.
Great. Dr. Chris, your tip?
Yeah, I would say seek education, both for yourself and your client. I think controlling what you can control, learning that can be very helpful. And part of that is resting is helpful. If you lay down and close your eyes and you don't fall asleep, but you're resting, that there's a benefit to that too, that you can control. And I think that we talk a lot about averages, and maybe the people that you're coaching are exceptional. They're not average people. So we get really fired up if the average person doesn't get X number of hours of sleep, they have a risk of dementia and heart attack and stroke. But just understand, a lot of patients that I'm sure Jennifer and I see fall on the edges of a bell curve. So they were never designed to sleep 8 hours, and their failures are not a failure of sleep, they're a failure of expectation. So, understanding that if you're getting 7 hours of sleep at night and functioning well and making gains in the gym and you don't feel tired and you try to get 8 but can only get 7, maybe that's what you need. So I think a lot of times just a simple word like 7's good too, if that's what you need, can be really freeing and helpful to people as well.
I love that. And in the certification, we talk a lot about how to individualize, how to assess, how to guide people through things that are aligned with them. So just a reminder for folks listening, get on that pre-sale. If you have these burning questions, all will be answered, I think, if you enroll in the sleep stress and recovery certification, launching November the 12th. So get yourself on that pre-sale list. Folks, I really want to thank you for being here with me. It's always such a treat to get to talk to you both. And I wrote down lots of little like memorable phrases like butt taping. That's the one I'm going to take to my grave probably. So Dr. Chris, Dr. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here. And thanks to all the folks who joined us. Hopefully we'll see the rest of you folks in our sleep stress and recovery certification. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Kristen.
See you guys.